Martha with theycallmemartha.com. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how you can use your leftover scrap paper to make really cute little micro mini albums. This is an album that I made last year, and I had just the smallest amount of paper left over from this collection that I really loved. I had some matching stickers and several of these kind of smaller photographs of my kids that I wanted to highlight. And so I came up with this cute little album. And when I was thinking about putting together a project for today, this is the album that came to mind as kind of the inspiration for the one I'm going to teach you today. And what I did is I increased the size of the album a little bit, and then I've constructed it a little differently. I think it's going to be a little easier to put together. I have just a few strips of paper here that are going to form our album, and then I have some smaller scraps that we'll decorate with that I'll go through in just a little bit. But you want to have 4 strips of paper. 3 are for the pages and 1 is for the cover. And I'll go ahead and in the video description box, I will link up my website where I'll have all of the written instructions for this project as well. The album is going to be 3 inches tall, and so all of our papers here are going to start at 3 inches. So our cover is 3 inches, and each of our pages are 3 inches tall. And the length varies from the cover to each of the individual pages. They're going to cascade kind of like a waterfall, and so they're all slightly smaller than the next. So our cover is 3 by 10, and then we have 3 pages that all, again, they measure 3 inches tall, and then the largest of the 3 is 6.5 inches wide. So 3 by 6.5, and then the next one is 3 by 6, and the inside one here is 3 by 5.5. So I'm going to flip this over and go ahead and score in several places here. So with the 10-inch side of the paper along the top of my scoreboard, I'm going to make a score line at 1.5 inches, at 4.5 inches, 5.5 inches, and 8.5 inches. So again, this is our cover. We're at 3 inches by 10 inches, and we've scored at 1.5, 4.5, 5.5, and 8.5. This is going to become our cover. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And now we're going to score our pages in the album. So this one is 3 by 6.5. Okay, for our first page, there's 2 score lines here that are in 8ths. And I don't want 8ths to scare you. If your scoreboard does not have 1/8-inch markers across the top, I'm just going to share with you my little tip for how I do 8ths, because my scoreboard doesn't have those markers either. So the first score line we're going to make is at 2 7/8. And the way I just always remember what 7/8 is it's halfway between 3/4 and 2 3/4 and 3. So there's one little tick mark in between there, and that's the 7/8 mark. So again, 2 7/8 is halfway between 2 3/4 and 3. The second score line we're going to make is at 3 5/8. And the way I remember that is it's halfway between 3.5 and 3 3/4. So that one tick mark that's in between them becomes 3 5/8. Okay, that's our first page. Okay, for our second paper, this one is 3 by 6. We're making 2 quick, easy score lines. No 8ths in this one. We're going to do 2 3/4 and 3 1/4. Again, 2 3/4 and 3 1/4. All right, so on our last page, again, this is 3 inches by 5.5. Our first score line is at 2 5/8, and that's halfway between 2.5 and 2 3/4. And our last score line is 2 7/8, which is halfway between 2 3/4 and 3. All right, so that's all the scoring that we have to do for this cute little album. All right, now we're ready to do a little folding and gluing, and I like to use wet glue. I prefer to use art glitter glue. It is my favorite. Just enough time to move it around a little bit before your glue sets up. So if you want to make sure it's just right, just lined up, it's the perfect glue to use. You can use a tape runner if you want, but I do suggest using wet glue. All right, so with your cover, so again, this one was 3 by 10. Let's see, 3 by 10, yep. We're going to do a little bit of folding, and then we're going to fold the pages and glue them in. So I'm going to start with the left-hand score line, and I'm just going to burnish it down. It makes a huge difference if you take the time to crease your folds. You end up with a much more finished album in the end. So the first one on the left, I'm going to fold inside to the album. And now I'm going to jump over here to the right, and I'm going to fold this one also to the inside of the album. So just as a quick tip, even though I have a score line here, I do like to hold it where the two papers meet. So I'm pointing to right here. So I'm making sure that those are lined up, because even though I have that score line in there, if you don't hold it, sometimes when you go to crease it, the paper will twist on you a little bit. And that's how you get that little bit of wonkiness, you know, in your folds. If they don't quite line up, it's because when you go to crease that, the paper twists a little. So again, if you hold it just a little bit on the corner and then make your crease, your paper will stay very square. All right, so the two score lines in the middle become the binding of the book. And I just kind of started to train my paper there a little bit for the first one. And now I'm going to, again, line up my corner right here. And then I'm going to use my bone folder and just give that score line a really good crease, okay? I'm going to repeat that for this side. I'm holding my corner right here and then pushing down with my bone folder, okay? So this little guy right here is going to become the cover of our album. All right, so now let's start working with our pages. So if you remember, each of the pages is a 1/2 inch shorter than the page before it. But the score lines in the middle are going to kind of nest inside of each other, and that's where we're going to glue. So you just want to do the same thing with your pages that you did on your cover. We're going to go ahead and burnish all of these score marks. And what we're doing is we're creating the gusset in the middle right here. And that's what we're going to glue in the binding. So that's the first one. And let me go ahead and fold the second. I love this paper. I think it's a leopard print, maybe? The line also has a really pretty cheetah paper, but I used all of it in another project. I didn't even have a little scrap of it left, but I like this paper too. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing with the last piece of paper. And so now you can see, if you line up the gussets for all three of those pages, you see how they nest inside of each other. So now we're going to go ahead and start gluing. So these little flaps on either side are going to become a little pocket. And so all I'm going to do is put a small bit of glue on the left and right of those tabs and glue them down. And here's where you want to be really careful and not over glue. If you over glue, it's going to seep out and glue your pocket down. And what I like to do is, after I've used a baby wipe, I let it sit out overnight and it dries. And then I use this to kind of wipe off that excess glue, and it works really, really great. Okay, so we have our first pocket done. Now I'm going to glue the other side the same way. And that's our cover, okay? And then I'm going to start by gluing in the largest of the three pages. So what we're going to do is we're going to glue this gusset to the middle of this gusset. And this is where that wet glue really becomes helpful. Because if you were using like a score tape here, once you set it down, it's kind of stuck in place. But here you'll see I've put wet glue on that spine. I'm going to hold my pages together, and I'm just really going to eyeball the center of the gusset that's on my cover. So I can see my score line here. I can see my score line on this other side. And then I'm making sure that I'm lining up top to bottom. I'm making sure that my cover lines up with my pages. So once that's kind of exactly where I want it, I'm just going to give it a good press. And now you can see that this page is attached to the binding. So I'll give you a quick look of what that looks like. Okay, so that page is in there. Now we're going to go with the next largest size. So in this case, it's my cheetah paper, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put that glue right on that spine, kind of not quite to the edge, but almost, right? And you don't want a ton of glue. And then I'm going to hold my pages together here and then line it up so that it's in the middle of this gusset right here. Okay, and again, I'm making sure that my pages stay square top to bottom, and this is where that wet glue allows me the freedom to move that paper around ever so slightly to line it all up. Okay, now that's in there. Now I'm taking my last page and I'm going to apply that glue, and you can see each one of the spines gets more narrow as you go down. And this is what creates that waterfall effect, okay? All right, so that's my last page. And I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure that I don't have any excess that's oozed out underneath. And you can see now I've created the binding and my pages are ready to decorate. So I think I might give it just a minute to set up and dry. And while that's drying, I can go over kind of some of the other scraps that I've cut here. So I went through what was left of my paper collection, and this one is called Favorites by Teresa Collins, and it's a collection of her favorite papers that she's released over the years. It's a collection of animal prints, several different pale pinks, and then some stripes and solids. So really nice collection. There's even some marble paper. There's a white and a black that's here as well, and also with some cut apart cards. This Choose to Be Happy is actually the marketing strip from the paper, and one of the things that Teresa Collins does that I really love is at the end of her paper, usually we cut these off and throw it away, but she will put in really nice sentiments on the end of this paper, and I use them constantly in my projects because they add a lot of character to your project, and they're already made for you, so why not use them? Why throw them away? So that's what I've done here, and I'm going to end up putting this on the spine of my book. All right, so let's start with our cover, and this should be dry enough now. And one other thing you can do, just as a tip, is once this kind of sets up and dries, is I'm just going to work it back and forth a little bit, kind of where those pages naturally fold, just to kind of reinforce that binding. All right, so I went ahead and matted this Dream Big that I cut out from the cut apart paper, and I made sure that I sized it so that it would fit on my cover. So you can see there it fits pretty nicely. And I think on the spine, I want to put a little scrap of this cheetah paper. And so I think what I'll do is I'm going to score it. So this is 2 inches by 3 inches. And I know that my spine, I believe it's 1 inch wide. Yep, my spine is 1 inch wide. And so I think if I score it at 1/2 inch and 1 1/4, that should leave me, yep, 1 inch in the middle. And I think what I was thinking of doing here is to wrap the spine with this little cheetah paper and have it hang over a little bit on the cover and on the back, just so you can kind of get a little bit more visual interest with the spine. Alternatively, you could cut it down and fit it within this space, but I think I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this down, and I'm back to my art glitter glue. I'm not going to use a ton here. And I'm just going to glue that around my binding and then make sure that my edges line up really nice and neat here. Again, the reason why I really love wet glue, I can move it around because inevitably, I don't care what trimmer you have, I don't think they ever truly are 100% straight. I mean, some of them are pretty close, but I like to have the flexibility of having that wet glue to kind of move it around a little bit. Okay, I need a little extra glue in on the flap here. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. Going back to my dry baby wipe. You would not want to do this with a wet baby wipe. The moisture in the baby wipe will actually remove some of the paper, which will pull away like your print. So you don't want to do that. Okay, so I have my little spine in there, and then I did cut down, as I said before, one of those little marketing strips from the paper, and I'm just gonna glue that in the middle of my spine. So I like this saying. It says, "Choose to be happy," which I thought was so cute. Okay, and then on my cover, I can glue this down to my cover. I could also pop it up. So if I put a little piece of foam under there, it gives it a little bit of dimension. So I think I'm going to do that. If you've seen any of my other videos, you've probably seen me use sheet foam before. I do not like to use like foam squares for larger pieces of paper, because what ends up happening is if I put a little foam dot here and I put one here and here, eventually where there's no foam, the paper's going to want to cave in. And so that's how you end up with that rippling sometimes when you use foam squares. Foam squares are great for like smaller things like mounting a flower or something small to give it dimension. But anytime you're working with a larger piece, I like to use this sheet foam. I pick it up in the kids section of the craft store, and it's usually by the felt. And I want to say it's maybe $1 a sheet. And the sheet has got to be, it seems to me like it's maybe tabloid size, which is 11 by 17. So you get a lot for $1. And you really only need a small piece. I usually leave just a little bit of a reveal on the outside rather than taking it to the edge. But again, all you need is a little bit of glue. Oh, and one other thing I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to put a little piece of ribbon underneath. I'm going to sandwich it underneath. And I'm just going to eyeball where about the middle is there, so that when I go ahead and I put this down, that ribbon is going to get caught inside. Okay. Just going to center that on my cover. Again, that glue allows me some time to move it around. And I think what I'll do is just have it close on the inside part of the album versus having it wrap. And so I'm just going to trim away this extra ribbon. I didn't want it going over my marketing strip in the back because I really like that little saying. So I'm just holding that down until it glues. I'm making sure that my ribbon is already attached. And you can see here the cover's already looking really cute. Add a little bit more glue here. The one thing I will caution you with using wet glue, even though, like I said before, it's my glue of choice, you want to use it very sparingly because paper doesn't like liquid. And so if you put too much down, the paper's going to want to warp. Okay? All right, so our cover is down, and now we can start working on the inside. So I thought it would be really cute to add on these little flaps. You remember we made these little flaps on the inside and on the back cover, is to put a little corresponding piece of paper just to kind of give it a little bit of detail. So I had a similar color. It's one of the different lines of blush. And I cut that just to fit. So it's probably, here, I'll give you the measurements. It's about 1.25 inches by 2 3/4. And that gives you just that little bit of an edge all the way around, which I really like. And then I can do the same thing on the back. And now I have a cute little pocket for something. I'm not sure what I'll put there yet, but okay. And so now your book is finished on the front. If you want, you could come in with something corresponding for the back. Yeah, I like that. So I'm not bringing in too much pattern, but I'm giving myself a place to glue my ribbon in the back for my closure. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure what this should be. So again, this is 3 inches by, between here and the end of this little binding wrap is 2.5. So I think we'll do 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 by 2 3/4. So let me just cut that really quick. Bring in my little paper trimmer here, by 2 3/4. And that should give me, yep, that should give me the perfect piece for the back. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to glue this down. And then I'm going to sandwich that ribbon in the middle. And so here I'm going to use my ribbon from the cover just as my guide so that my ribbons line up. And I think I can just lay this down just like that in my ribbon. And then when I come back in with my little piece of marble paper, I'll just catch that ribbon underneath, just like that. Okay. So you can see I'm using just the tiniest scraps that are left to kind of put this album together. And that's, again, what I really liked about it, is that otherwise I think I would have thrown them away because they weren't really big enough to make another layout, or even to make, I might have been able to make a card. But so now if I go back to my inspiration piece here, you can see some of my photographs I matted on black and some I did not. It's really up to you. So if you really like this paper, maybe you don't want to cover it up. Maybe you just want to go ahead and put your photo right over the actual paper. But if you also want to make it maybe a little bit more interesting, you can take some of the remaining scraps that you have and glue those in as well. You can use solids that you might have left, maybe something in like a black solid, or even a craft color would look really cute with this. Let's see, let me put the other one somewhere else. So maybe I'll put this other one back here. And all you have to do is measure the page that you want to put your little scrap on, and then I just back off about 1/4 inch, and that all the way around, and then that gives me the perfect mat, right, to lay down. And then you can come back in and do things like those little marketing strips I was talking about. Here's one that says live your best life. This one says you are strong. You could come and trim these down, and sometimes I'll pull out my paper trimmer and try to get them exactly straight, or these long shears work really nicely sometimes too, just to get that straight edge so that you have that border all the way around. You can add these in. I've done that here where I put in dream, put in you are magic. There's one on the front. So you can come back in and decorate this album any way you like. And I think I'm gonna just keep working with this and keep using my scraps. And on this one, I've ultimately decided I think I'm gonna cut the white off, because there's not a whole lot of white in this album. And I want the black sentiment to kind of stand out a little bit more, because I like what it says, "You are strong." And you could add it in over a photograph, as I was showing you before in the example, or off to the side, and then tuck your photograph underneath like that. Would look really cute. And in fact, I kind of like how this paper just happens to be just about the right dimension. Just make sure here, trim it ever so slightly. I think that looks kind of cute. So I'm going to glue that in. And you can see here how any little scraps that you may have left, you can really add a lot of character to your book and get rid of a lot of those little pieces and parts that you have, but maybe paper that you really enjoy, and build a cute little book, just like this one. So on this page, I thought I would show you how I add like a little flip up, which gives you a little bit more real estate to put some pictures. Here's how one of those looks when it's all in place. Here's one that goes the other direction. And basically all I'm going to do is take whatever paper I want to make my flip up and just put a score line where I want it to fold out. So in this case, I think I'm going to lay this one right over top of the mat that I already have there. And I think I'll just put in about 1/4 of an inch of a hinge. I wouldn't go any less than that because the hinge won't function properly if it's super skinny. So I've just put that in my scoreboard and then burnished down that fold. And then I just need a little bit of glue along this edge. And then I'm going to line it up with my page along the top and let that dry here. I'm going to, again, with my wet glue, have the opportunity to move it around a little bit. And now I've created that little pop-up, just like that. So I hope you liked this tutorial and that you're inspired to make one on your own. I'm going to go ahead and, again, post in the description where you can link to my website if you can get all the directions and dimensions that I've used today if you want to see something in a printed format. And I hope you make one of these cute little albums using your scraps too, and give it as a gift, keep it for yourself. But I really like how it turned out. I love the size, and again, I love that I'm able to finish up using all of those little bits and pieces of paper that I otherwise probably would have thrown out. So anyway, hope you like it too. If you do, please give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. I'd really appreciate it. And if you like my work and you want to follow me, I would love for you to subscribe. Thanks. Have a great day.